Hello and welcome to the One-on-One podcast. If you're enjoying the show, consider signing up for the Patreon. There you get ad-free content, early access, exclusive episodes, and monthly supporter hangouts. You can find it at patreon.com/the Juan-on-Juan podcast. If you don't like the subscription-based models, there are other ways of supporting the show that are linked in the description. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy this episode. This guy's hat because we hate Trump. But no, just read it. Make sure you read it good, right? Make esoterica great again. And welcome back to another episode of the One-on-One podcast. I'm your host as always, and please excuse me today as I am recovering from a cold or something that the lizard people have casted upon me, because I know it was meant for me, because they're trying to silence me. I woke up Saturday without a voice at all. Like, I was going to record Saturday and I couldn't because my voice was like completely gone. So
it could be Havana syndrome.
I don't know what it is, bro, but I'm just going to go with the lizard people send it upon me. So excuse me if I'm a little bit raspy today. And make sure to follow the show, social media, at the One-on-One podcast, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever, everywhere at the One-on-One podcast, theoneononepodcast.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And back by popular demand, one of the greatest guests we've had on the show. He's got that Longo blood in him, so that's probably why.
That'll do it.
Welcome back, Professor Longo.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
What have you been up to since we last spoke?
Just running the bookstore. Things are chugging along. I started a publishing business pretty recently. Working on our first project. That's pretty exciting. So should have our first book out this summer.
Nice.
It's not something I'm writing or anything like that, but yeah.
And what made you do that, bro? You just wanted to bring more material to the realm, or?
Yeah, I just I kind of saw a hole. Like I collect books, and I saw a hole in the market of really well-made books that are beautiful. To be honest, it sounds kind of vain, you know, to be sort of buying a book because it looks cool. But anyone who says they don't do that is probably lying. I think some books are only popular because they have a cool cover. At least it's an introduction. It has been for me. I've bought books. I'm just like, that just looks cool, and it ends up being really cool. And so I thought, and that's kind of going away, because to get the cool cover, you have to spend money on a real artist most of the time. And books are already not very profitable ventures for the most part. So people usually go with some stupid cover that some graphic designer did, and they print a cheap paperback version of it. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense to me, because books are already not practical, right? They're completely absurd, in terms of storage space and the time and like all that kind of stuff. So why try to make something practical when they're not, why try to make the cheap paperback when it's already an impractical thing? You should just go big at that point and just make it cool, make a really nice hardcover with a beautiful cover art and all that. Yeah. And then there's also so many things that are out of print, whether they're in the public domain and you can easily reprint them, or they're like pretty cheap to license. And I just saw that firsthand in the bookstore, and I was like, oh, might as well just do it myself.
Is there anything you want to plug for the people and where they can find you, or are you going to leave that up to?
No, it's really early on. We don't even really have a name down, but we're working on a book that's going to be called Monad. And it's a compilation of Neoplatonic writings translated by Thomas Taylor. So things by Plotinus, Iamblichus, Porphyry, Proclus. It's going to be like a collection, basically, like a nice thick book. And can't give away too many other details, but we have I would say, very well-known occult artist who's doing the cover. He's done a bunch of stuff for like some other big occult publishing companies and boutique publishing businesses. So teamed up with him, and should be out this summer, I think.
Does his name start with a J?
No, does not.
All right, because I was gonna say,
yeah, okay. He's not like a household name, but if you're really into like collecting occult books, then you've probably seen his covers and just not realized, because he's done a lot of stuff.
Okay, that's cool. Well,
yeah, it's me really.
Are you gonna get into monadology at all? Are you talking about the monad?
Yeah, I guess I already am in the monadology.
Throw some Leibniz in there, and right.
Yeah, I really like Heidegger is a monist, and then the Neoplatonists and Plato himself and Pythagoras and a lot. I mean, most mysticism is essentially monist. It's almost inherent to the philosophy, I guess, or the practice.
Yeah, the idea of taking God and breaking him down into something that you can manipulate. I mean, that's the whole Monas Hieroglyphica, right? Yeah. Being able to manipulate reality through alchemy and break it further down than it's already broken down, right? And that when you start to think about that, it blows your mind. And I know we're going to be talking a little bit about Byzantine, or did I say that right? Byzantine Magick, Byzantine Empire. And this is around, kind of sort of around that time. This is the 5th century. 5th century all the way up until the 15th century.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, dude. And I know I wanted to touch upon a little bit about what we talked about last time, because it was a really fascinating conversation where it went as far as you blew my mind towards the end of it. And it was just like this concept. And I've recently been getting into Jung. And I know we talked about George Luis Borges last time and his idea of fiction. And it kind of sort of plays into the tree of, I've been learning about Kabbalah and how when you start to transcend the Sephiroth, how that's that, I don't want to say the mundus imaginalis because that's a whole different concept, but this imaginary world, this place that you can go to either mentally, or I believe that maybe perhaps you can get there physically at a point with you know, through a portal of some sorts. But the idea of interdimensional literature, that's what I coined it. Interdimensional literature that has affected people's reality.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say interdimensional, because Carl Jung is essentially dealing with multiple dimensions. We wouldn't call them that because we're always thinking physical. So when people are saying, "Oh, that's a different dimension," you know, they're hopping between dimensions. They're usually thinking, "Oh, there's, you know, out in the world outside of me, there's things popping in and out of invisibility or something, and there's like a parallel world." I'm not saying that's not true. I mean, I don't think it is personally, but most people think
You
that it's
don't?
sort of out there. Well, I don't really have a reason to believe so, but there's one other dimension that we do know about and that we do directly experience, and that is the unconscious, and well, the unconscious in all its forms. So one of them being dreams, and the unconscious mind. It is another dimension of reality, of your reality, my reality. We experience it directly, like we actually come face to face with it, and things can go between the unconscious and the conscious mind, and that is hopping between dimensions. You know, I don't know if you follow what I'm saying, but so that sort of ends up
Absolutely.
being that
Yeah.
interdimensionality. That's what I think of, is going between the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, and sort of that bridge between, and which essentially you end up with in dreams and things like that.
So I had on Ronnie Pontiac, and he was the one that studied with Manly P. Hall for. He studied for him. He knew him for 7 years, and he studied for him for. He was his authorized bibliographer for a little while,
Wow.
and I had asked him if he sort of felt initiated by Manly P. Hall in a sort of weird way. Now, he did say he was visited by Manly in his dreams, and he kind of hinted at towards something, but he didn't really come out and say he was initiated, because the first thing you would think, he met the old Manly P. Hall, but the younger Manly P. Hall, the occult anatomy of man, Manly P. Hall, the secret teachings of all ages, Manly P. Hall, that was the occultist Manly P. Hall. That was like the OG hardcore Manly P. Hall. And he said that he did teach him one thing, which I tried the other night, I think last night or the night before, the Pythagorean recollection. Because I know we're talking about the dreamscape, which some people believe that the dream realm is another dimension, that things are able to come in through into our reality. Now, maybe not supernaturally, because I like the supernatural too. I do think that there is an area for the supernatural at one point somewhere, like that quantum intent.
I think that the supernatural and high strangeness is occurring in the collective unconscious,
Mm,
and that it is jumping from the collective unconscious, which is unseen, it's not within our conscious awareness by definition, and it's hopping into our into our conscious awareness. You see, and that is the hopping between dimensions.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
when you see a being or a ghost or a flying saucer or something that pops in sort of out in mundane reality, I don't think it's hopping between some random, you know, other planet or other universe into this planet. I think it's hopping between our sort of collective unconscious mind up into the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm. The perceivable
Yeah,
reality.
into the perceivable. So I don't think that it's sort of out there. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it is sort of, uh, not to take away from it. Doesn't mean that it's like, oh, it's all in your head. It's and the reason that I think that. Oops, sorry. Can you still see me?
Yeah, I can still see.
All right, I just had a window pop up on my computer. the reason I think that is because the only other dimension that we actually have experience of that we can really talk about is the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't experience these mathematical parallel universes. None of us have any direct experience of those. So why point to those when there's a really wacky, crazy other dimension in the unconscious that we do experience, we know is real? So that's why I point to that.
So the reason I was saying that was because you have Jung and his Red Book. And I'm diving now into Jung. I'm getting there. And my research, I always stay stuck on one thing and then I'll kind of like waddle along different topics, and the topic of Jung has been popping up a lot. And you're absolutely right. There are things in our unconscious that can be projected into this perceivable reality. And I was listening to a podcast today, Nick Hinton on My Family Thinks I'm Crazy with Mark, and they were talking about the mysterious airships of the 19th century and how that evolved from these mysterious airships from Walter Bosley's work to this futuristic flying saucer that we see now. And I know that Jung talked about the flying saucer phenomenon and how this could be projections of our psyche and all these different things. But the idea that when you start to write these things down in some sort of weird way, they start to manifest themselves in our reality. And that's what the Red Book was all about, how he's talking about these entities that he's interacting with. And then as soon as he starts to acknowledge it and write it down, it stops kind of, because he was being haunted. And you know who else was being haunted? That we talked a little bit about on the last part. John Dee was being haunted. And then he talked about Edward Kelly and that spiritual creature that led him to the Voynich manuscript. And also, I believe it was, he had conjured that spiritual creature through the use of the Voynich manuscript.
Really?
Yeah, it was on the...
Yeah, he messaged me about that.
Because like, how wild is that? Because you have the Voynich manuscript where some people say it's some guy looking through a microscope at one point, and it was what he was seeing. And then you have other people talking about they feel a certain type of way when they're reading it. Are the pages made of some sort of, or the ink made of some sort of poison or something? Or is it because you're not initiated? That's why you feel some sort of way, right? It's like this weird, that's why I dubbed it interdimensional literature, because these books that quite literally affect reality, even if that is a psychedelic trip or not. But this idea, I really love it. So Jung starts writing his experiences in this book, and it's a sort of way to navigate the dreamscape, the unconscious, and kind of tame it, which then I relate that to Borges' work, where he's talking about how fiction is more real than reality itself. And then even some of the concepts in his books, like Talon and was it Ukbar, Talon, where they're reminds me of Tartaria. They're creating this entire universe, essentially, this entire history, and they do it through what? Through books. It's like, I found this book, but then I'm trying to find the references, and I'm not finding the references, but it's there. So they start to They start to believe it because it's in this book. So I don't know, man. I think it's a very interesting concept as far as writing things down. And I've been told by an occultist that when it's written down, and I guess this is where written in stone comes from, it's solidified in our reality in some sort of weird way, because vowels hold existence together. And that's why that's
sigils obviously are huge with writing down.
Well, this is why some cultures don't use vowels when they're spelling out the name of God. That's why it's G-D,
right?
Because they can't use vowels. But then you have the Gnostics who would use these weird incantations that would be vowels. They would be these weird, they're using like the vowels, bro, and like conjuring. Who knows what they were conjuring? Probably like.
There's two things that are interesting. One was you were talking about sort of like calling things into being in like the imagination. So Alfred North Whitehead is a really good philosopher if you haven't read him. he talks about that, and he proves the existence of metaphysics. Metaphysics obviously meaning things which are outside of physics, so things that are not, just like wheels rolling down a hill or something, that don't abide by physical laws. And most notably cause and effect, because that's sort of the underlying presumption and law of physics, is like regular cause and effect. This thing bumps into that and makes it move, sort of deal. And it's very linear. And he proves that with the imagination. So he says that the mind creates things from the future coming backwards. So you actually think of it first, like, I'm going to do this, and then you do it. And that thought is sort of you doing it in like the mental universe, and then you actually do it. So it comes backwards. And so he says cause and effect is completely flipped in the mind. And he says that proves that there are metaphysics. There are things which operate outside of standard cause and effect. And I thought that was so cool that it comes from the, sort of comes backwards at you. You sort of dream it up and then do it.
It's Roko's basilisk, where before you can even stop it, by you just thinking about stopping it, it's already won. It's already beaten you, because it's already manifested itself in the future. And back to what I was saying about Ronnie Pontiac, he said the Pythagorean recollection technique, and I've been using different techniques to remember my dreams. And I talked to your brother about it when we went out to go eat that day, and he told me it was like Masonic. I've also seen other people say it's chaos magic-y, and then some others say Buddhist. But essentially, Pythagorean recollection, this is a whole nother thing, is where when before you go to sleep, you remember all your events of that day, because you're talking about it backwards. Well, you think about all the things that you did that day backwards.
Yeah, Crowley tells you to do that in
does he?
Book 4 in his magic. So the famous thing when people do the singing backwards, like in
backmasking,
that comes from Crowley, because in one of his books he says do everything backwards.
Whoa.
As an exercise. He says learn to write left-handed, learn to talk backwards, watch movies backwards. That's why people watch like Disney movies and they see them doing like, all these like crazy things when you watch it backwards. And Crowley was saying to do that as an exercise, sort of break the linearity. And exactly what you said is what he says to do. He says before bed. And he says it's too difficult to start with the whole day. So he says to sort of start with the smallest or shortest period of time that you can think of, like you walking into the room. And once you've mastered being able to do that backwards, you can sort of keep going further and further and further. And then, he basically says you could go into almost like past lives. You could go all the way and he calls it the magical memory. He has like tons of stuff on it.
So I did because I've done the Pythagorean recollection, and I tried that for the first time. And the problem is, I don't know if it was a nightmare or not, but I was able to remember my dream, because I had a pretty simple day yesterday. It was a Sunday. I didn't really do much. So I was able to go back to the day and remember what I did. And then you're supposed to play it forward, and then you're supposed to be able to just get good. You're going to get good at it eventually, whatever, if you keep at it. But point being is, I remembered my dream. I don't know if it was a nightmare or not, because it was a kind of creepy ass dream. But that's the problem, that you remember the good and the bad. So you remember the scary parts too, and the actual dream itself. And then the other method that I tried, the skull fuck method, which I've talked on the show about before. But essentially, you're supposed to envision your
that one's pretty weird.
Your spine becoming a big.
That's a backlash on that one.
Was it with you that I talked about that?
Yeah, it is. Or it was.
Really? Because I've talked about it a whole bunch of times. But yeah, the big penis in the spine, and apparently that's like involves sexual gnosis and visualization. So it's supposed to help you achieve it. And dude, I'm telling you, bro, it works. And then so ever since I've been doing the reading about Jung and how this he talks about remembering your dreams and being able to write them down and take notes and all this stuff. I've been kind of practicing those methods, and it's so creepy how I'm able to recall my dreams to a T, bro. It's the craziest thing, and it's always the most potent. So I don't, because whenever I smoke weed, I don't dream, bro. I don't.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
It's like it shuts it off. So you have to go through, at least I do, detoxify myself for X amount of weeks, not smoke, and then get back into the flow of the visualization and all everything else until I can start to remember my dreams. And it'll come randomly. It'll be like, and it's always the most potent the first night where I do it, and then it's that dream is like boom from like the beginning, bro, all the way to the end. I had this crazy dream where Bigfoot was shooting at me with like a 22 rifle, and I was like outside with a whole bunch of Chinese people, like this outside theater. It was crazy, dude. And then I was talking about Bigfoot in front of somebody else, and then they started talking about Bigfoot too, and we manifested Bigfoot. And I was like, this is why everybody needs to fucking mind their own business, because they heard me talking about it, like, oh, this dude's talking about. So we manifested Bigfoot, and he started shooting at us. So it's like this weird thing.
There's one thing that I was actually going to bring up Bigfoot, as I do, because you mentioned, and this is a funky connection I didn't think we were going to make, but you mentioned the vowels, and you said that there's some like Gnostic, whatever rituals or something that they use.
Yeah, I'll pull them up now. But continue.
Yeah, well, there's something in Solomonic magic called the barbarous words. And basically, when you're doing like the preliminary evocations to sort of get you in the right headspace of going into this, you're going to evoke something into a triangle, basically. It's pretty gnarly. So you have to prepare yourself. And that involves a lot of stuff. But to cut it short, there's a part of it where you speak the barbarous words. And there's no such thing as barbarous words. It basically just means glossolalia. It's nonsense. So you just spew out. It's actually part of it. The magician spews out just like, who will love you good, just like absolute garbage. And a lot of it's vowels. Because it's hard to do that with just saying, like hard consonants. You sort of end up just being like, and the reason that you're doing that is to put you in an irrational state of mind. So you actually say these things which make no sense, and they break up that sort of rational, mundane mindset to put you into a space where the idea of like a demon inside of a triangle across from you is not that crazy. Whereas like 10 minutes before you were like, oh, before you did that, you were like, oh, that's crazy. But then once you're like spewing glossolalia, you're like, oh, okay, maybe that's not that. And so you kind of touched on that with the Gnostics. It's still going on in Solomonic magic. If you read the Goetia and things like that, the barbarous words.
I mean, don't we all in our free time just read Goetic magic stuff, bro?
We all do, yeah. But one weird thing that I've connected recently, which is it's pretty out there, but if you look up something called the Sierra sounds, I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I am.
But it's the most accredited or referenced recording of.
It's by Ron Moorhead, right?
Yeah, by Ron Moorhead. If you play it, it's the barbarous words.
No.
It's the samurai chatter are barbarous words. They are this like magical, mystical glossolalia that's spewing forth. And it sort of says to me that it's like this key of going between the unconscious and conscious. Or irrational.
So, all right. See, we never talk about what we're going to talk about, because there's just so much to talk about.
No, it's all right.
But you're saying that I did an episode with somebody who they said that what if the clicking of sounds and rocks together with that they attribute with Sasquatch or Bigfoot is actually just that. That's the sound it makes when it's coming in through to this dimension. But then it would leave on the table, what the fuck is a Sasquatch or what the fuck is Bigfoot? And why is it even doing that to begin with? And you're linking freaking goetic magic with...
Yes, forget about the rock clicking. Listen to the Sierra sounds, and it's the barbarous words.
I'm trying to pull it up here. Sierra sounds. Let me check here. Hopefully we don't summon anything today. Let me reshare my screen. See if I can get this to play. But hopefully we don't conjure anything up. Thanks.
That's all right.
Thanks to.
You ever hear about that Beach Boys song?
Yeah, where you play it backwards and it sounds like there's a demon whipping somebody or something like that.
No.
That's a different one then.
There's a Beach Boys song where they say if you play it, like it starts a fire or something, and so they like hid it for decades, and it's finally come out. It probably doesn't because it's out now, but that was the rumor.
No, there's another one. I think it's a Led Zeppelin or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, let me see if this is it right here. So,
we're in for a night view.
Can you hear that? That part. Oh, that's creepy.
It keeps going.
You trying to talk to this?
So what do you think that was, bro? What do you?
There's the samurai chatter where it's like,
yeah,
that's the one I'm talking about. Where it sounds like the barbarous words to me. If you were to do that part of goetic magic, it would sound the same as that tape, basically.
So I've had Lawrence Caruana on the show before, once upon episode 9 or something like that, very long time ago, and he's the one. So when I first started podcasting, I went deep on Gnosticism and all that good stuff, and I really just like cut my teeth. Yeah, and that was my Gnosticism. Yeah. It's really fascinating.
It's so interesting, but I feel like it's just a cul-de-sac because everyone I know, me included, who gets like really into it, you kind of just come out of it and you're like, like it sounds so like alluring, but I've only gotten a few things from it, to be honest.
Well, because it's another cosmology, bro. It's another story of creation, and anything that you can think of, quite literally, any religion that you can think of, there is an opposite of that exact religion somewhere else. One man's devil is another man's God, and it's gonna be like that for forever. I'm going to hell in some other people's religions, and they're going to hell in mine. It's just the way it is. Yeah. And I think, in some sort of weird way, that kind of cancels itself out. Like it can't, I say, it can't equal the same thing. It cancels itself out in the equation. Well, it's the same thing. I think it cancels itself out in reality if we're both going to each other's hells. It's like, well, we just don't go anywhere, and that's how we're here. But Caruana talked about it, how he calls it, so the second book of IO, and then he goes on to hear this I've watched this presentation. I promise you, like, I'm not lying. It's a 2-hour presentation. I've watched it probably 10 times. I'm not lying. I'm not even exaggerating. Like 10 times at least.
That's crazy.
It's great, dude. It's amazing. He's an amazing lecturer. But he gets into here about the vowels and what I was telling you about, how if it'll ever load. So essentially, when you're transcending through the aeons, right? The vocalizations. So here he talks about it, where I challenge you. So they start to say pretty much the entity's name, because essentially every celestial body is a different demon, and every celestial orbit is a different dimension. So according to Gnostic cosmology, when you're trying to transcend to the upper eons, right, heaven, that to emerge with the one, the androgynous being, you need to learn every single demon's name. And in order to do that, because every single demon has power over you in the material world, and if you succumb to that demon, you've succumbed to lust or greed or whatever it was, if you don't learn that demon's name. So here he's talking about breaking it down. I challenge you, XYZ, whoever it is, the word who came forth from the silence, and then they start doing these vocalizations, IL, and Gospel of the Egyptians. Names with vowels are spoken in the tongue of the Father, first book. Names with the consonants are spoken with the tongue of the flesh. So the sound of the double long vowels are superior to the short semi-vowels. So it's this whole thing with the language. It's a mystical. That's why in Harry Potter you have them speaking the spells, and it happens in real life, and they can shoot lightning bolts or whatever it is. And it's just making me think of Full Metal Alchemist when they always freak out, like, oh, you can do alchemy without a transmutation circle, because he does the whole hand thing, fucking mudras or whatever it is. You have Naruto with the mudras too, and doing all this crazy stuff. So I think that language itself was more powerful than it is now. And I think that's why you have all this mumble rap and bullshit and this lingo and other kids lingo nowadays, and the slang, that it's demystifying the language even further and diluting it even further. And I don't know why the fuck this isn't even loading. But he goes on to talk about it in this presentation towards the end. And he says that we don't really know much about it. But point being that there is something to do with language that has an effect on reality itself. And I'll send you this presentation. It's a really great presentation, bro. Like, he goes so hard in the paint. And he also does on alchemy as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Terrence McKenna talks about that. Terrence and James Joyce too. They both, and Wittgenstein as well, believe that, or sort of prove that the limit of our world and of our imagination is set with language. So nothing can be dreamed of or seen which can't be termed, basically.
Yeah, we're held back, and that's why guys like Elon Musk want to hook us up to a Neuralink language and its powers. I'm taking notes here, but that's why guys like Elon Musk want to hook us up to this Neuralink, because he talked about, we're gonna get to a point where we won't even need to vocalize anymore. It'll all just be mental. And
yeah,
I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I'm not transhumanist whatsoever. I think that, but again, I also think that people should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies, right? If you want to put a chip in your ass, then feel free to put it wherever you want, right? I mean, it's freedom of choice. If you want to do that, that's so be it. But I don't see it ending well. It's how you and I have talked about it, the Faustian Pact. It's how far are you willing to go, and we know how that story ends. We know where it goes, bro. They've done a whole bunch of movies about it anyways to begin with.
Yeah. Well, Terrence McKenna didn't think we were gonna go to the chip side, but he thought that we would transcend language into images, almost like he called it his archaic revival. We'd go almost back to like hieroglyphic type stuff, where like the image is representative of the thought or the proposition. So almost like in a movie or something, when you see it, you know what it is. There's nothing in between. It's intuited. So I don't, you know what I mean? And he thought that everything would become image based, basically, all language.
Well, we're kind of sort of there now with emojis, and I think there's like this weird, crazy thing with emojis where it's like super protected, and the company that introduced the emojis is very serious about the emojis. Have you ever heard anything about that? The conspiracy behind emojis?
No, I haven't dug that deep.
It's in my friend's book. I have to I'll pull it up here in a second. But the idea that the company that made them, but if you really look at it, they're like some people in the community that I know they talk with like straight emojis, and I don't really understand what they're saying, but I think
That's hilarious.
it's got like a deeper. It's like the modern day hieroglyphics, and how you're saying.
So he thought that we would get to a point, and he thought obviously that psychedelics were a pathway to that, to sort of breaking down the barriers of our mind, to where we can get to this sort of meme, emoji, image-based language. And he's a what they call a techno-determinist, which means that they think
McKenna.
Huh?
McKenna is a techno-determinist, you said?
Yeah. He follows in the footsteps of Marshall McLuhan. And like Marshall McLuhan wrote a book called The Media is Medium, or The Media is the Message. So sort of like how you're getting your information determines how you'll think in culture and all that. So things like, typesetting, font instead of cursive. So perfect uniform letters gave birth to democracy with perfect uniform people with equal image, like that sort of thing. They basically think that how you're getting your information determines how you think in like the culture.
Absolutely. The deliverance is everything. It's like when you, with sarcasm, a joke, the delivery, the execution is everything. So absolutely that would make sense. And I found this here. This is in a book it's not out yet, but it's by Nick Hinton. And he talks about emojis. It's from the New World Disorder book. And he says here, nevertheless, it's no coincidence that we are now noticing associations between the smiley face, mind control, chaos magic, drugs, and electronic music. And many would argue that dancing in a disassociated state to strange frequencies resembling binaural beats in a dark room full of flashing lights is a form of MK Ultra in and of itself. But by the late 1980s, the smiley face had made its way into cyber culture as well, because he gets into this whole thing of the smiley face killings and the actual smiley face itself, the history of that. At the time, a Carnegie Mellon professor named Scott Fahlman used the characters, and it's the semicolon, dash, and then parentheses, to suggest a joke in text. And in 1999, the designer Shigetaka Kurita, and I could be saying that wrong, created the world's first tiny digital smiley face we now know as emojis. They were then used on mobile phones in Japan. Remember how I said emojis would become relevant in the later chapter? Well, you're about to find out why. Apparently, emojis are a very serious business, and they are controlled by a strange organization. The Unicode Consortium approves what emojis are used. One of the voting members of the organization is Berkeley, and another is the Ministry of Awqaf and Religious Affairs. I don't know who the fuck that is. The governmental body in the Sultanate of Oman. Sultanate of Oman. Oh God. That is responsible for overseeing all matters related to the religious affairs. So wait, are emojis a religious affair? Oddly enough, Khor Rori is an ancient temple in the Sultanate of Oman. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Said to have once belonged to the Queen of Sheba, the legendary woman who made a deal with King Solomon in exchange for 666 talents of gold. Supposedly, he goes on. Because check this out. So it gets spicy. So for 666 talents of gold, supposedly this deal involves Solomon trading his hidden knowledge, and this is weird because we're talking about goetic magic, of demonic sigils, of which there were 72, the same amount of original core emojis. Even more odd, an archaeologist named Wendell Phillips was from Berkeley, made an expedition to another temple that supposedly belonged to the same queen in Yemen near the city called Marib. Yeah. And it said at one point Marib was the capital of Saba, the kingdom of the biblical queen of Sheba, who was said to rule after the expedition. Hold his concession. And something Marie wanted to Solomon Queen. And in the context of emojis being demonic sigils, emojis sound a lot like the mimetic mind virus. Okay, so he goes on to the language of hieroglyphic-like symbols. Perhaps they are more powerful than we realize. So essentially, that King Solomon connection is kind of weird. where it's the same people from the city that the Queen of Sheba who made the deal with King Solomon. And there were 72 original emojis and the 72 demonic sigils, which are the keys of Solomon, right? That's the keys of Solomon in Goetic magic. And essentially, when you draw this sigil, you can use a demon for whatever it is that you want to use him for.
Yeah, and that to me connects with Jung also. And Crowley went back and forth on that. So he thought initially, early in his career, if you want to call it a career, it's kind of a weird word, but early in his life, he thought that magic, and specifically Solomonic magic, I don't want to say in your head, but sort of what I was talking about earlier, where it's sort of like this
The archetypes,
unconscious, imaginative phenomena of like jumping between the unconscious and conscious dimensions, and which doesn't take away from it, by the way. I don't think that takes away from it. It doesn't mean that it's not real. It's just as real as anything else. But then later on, he kind of flipped on that and said, no, like there are sort of things that are out there, like demons and daemons and angels that are outside of your mind or what have you. And but I tend to go with the first. I'm kind of a Jungian, if you couldn't tell. But I think that in Goetic magic, those sort of names of demons are parts of your fractured mind of yourself. They're repressed parts of you. So like a negative part of your own mind that can sort of control you, like let's call it rage or something. The rage that's inside of you, when it comes up, takes over, and it is sort of demonic. And you're sort of the one holding it all together. And there's all these emotions that we could give names to. And basically in Goetic magic, they're giving them names, but they're demonic names. And you call them forth and master them. And in Jung, his whole thing of individuation is calling forth the repressed parts of yourself or your shadow and that sort of thing, negative aspects of you that you don't wish to see, calling them into being, sort of analyzing them and working through them and mastering them, which is what you do in Solomonic magic. You literally sort of bind these things to you, and once you've bound all of them, you're a complete person. In Jungian terms, you've sort of achieved union with yourself, and sort of rounded up all the little demons in your own mind. So that's how I like to think about it. I don't really. I mean, I guess you could be. So that's my dog squeaking her toys.
Oh, that was so on point, bro.
Yeah. I got a little dog now.
Oh, you got a new dog?
Yeah.
Is that a pug?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I think I was thinking about pugs actually the other day. That's weird.
Yeah. Every magician has a black dog.
I'm gonna be doing an episode on familiars and like the greatest hits. So Paracelsus' white horse, right? That was given to him by the devil, and he could travel long distances without getting tired or whatever. But this idea of, and I'm trying to find where Crowley talks about the Goetic demons being part of your subconscious.
Yeah.
Because he wrote about Goetia, and it would make a lot of sense. And I've heard people refer to Carl Jung's work as the occult, but through an academic lens. Exactly.
Through a psychologist studying the occult and mystical phenomena. I mean, you can see that, right? He has books on flying saucers and books on alchemy and books on dreams and books on actual occultism. Like, so he was no stranger to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
In the Red Book and things like that, he was practicing. What do they call it? Like the guided writing. What do they call that?
Channeled writing.
Yeah, there's a name for it. It starts with an A, I think. I feel stupid right now. But basically, you just start writing and something comes through, and whether that's in his mind, that's your unconscious. Your unconscious is writing, and you're not aware of what it's doing. And he sort of thinks the same thing in like a Ouija board, you know, that if you were to ask Jung, he thinks it's the lower part of your mind sort of coming out and speaking to you. And same thing with divination, like the tarot and things like that, it's not, it's sort of these other parts of your mind, higher or lower, it could be your guardian angel, or it could be your unconscious mind that's giving you the answer, you know, to your question, and saying like, look, you really do know. It's just not the conscious you. Yeah, you know what the answer is, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's Nietzsche's Übermensch, where you become this overman, this Superman that's able to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do.
Yeah, and I'm a huge into Nietzsche. We could do several videos on that. But actually, to go back to the Neoplatonists, they were into the same thing. So they were into super subjectivity. And super subjectivity it's basically their idea of gnosis, or, you know, sort of their end goal of spirituality. And in ascetic practices, the goal is objectivity. So you actually sort of want to become an object. You know, I'm going to sit so still that I turn into a rock, you know, like that sort of thing. You're sort of dissolving the mind. You're obliterating the mind. You're obliterating the subject to become the object.
I thought about this weird concept on my last podcast. I said, we were talking about Kabbalah, and we'd start talking about reincarnation. And I asked myself, I said, I wonder how many ladybugs, I mean, just taking an insect, for example, are conscious. Like that they were somebody and they were reincarnated as a ladybug. So on the outside, you see a regular
bad boy, yeah.
You see a regular ladybug, but then on the inside, it's just like a person like wanting to break free. Like wanting to break free because they just got reincarnated as a fucking locust or a grasshopper or something. Can you imagine, bro? If you pieced out of this,
talked about that. Nietzsche said that all animals are in a state of religious bliss.
Whoa.
At all times. Yeah, that was interesting.
Religious bliss.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep.
Oh, the super subjectivity, though. So in ascetic religions and spiritual systems, you want to sort of disobjectify or something. You want to turn into an object. You want to obliterate the self and sort of go downwards. And in sort of that Übermensch, high vitality philosophy or spirituality, it's almost the exact opposite. So instead of I want to become nothing, you say I want to become everything. You know, and whether those things could just be a circle, right? There's like no difference. But in the philosophy of it, or the motivation behind it, there is. And in magical traditions and Neoplatonic traditions, Nietzschean traditions, you sort of want to become a super subject. So you become everything. And the way, one of the metaphors they use is, they say, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, you burn the hay. And all you have left is the needle. I thought that was really interesting.
You become the needle. So that's the Neoplatonists, which we have the Pythagoreans, you have the Platonists, Neo-Pythagoreans, and then
they're directly in. They're all Neo-Pythagorean as well.
Yeah,
they're directly in that lineage. You have Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato. I know there's people between, but you get the idea. And then down to Aristotle, and there's a little bit of a break there as the Roman Empire is sort of like getting larger, and the Greek Empire is dissolving. And people are kind of like, all right, like we have Aristotle and Plato, like I think we're good. And then, there's 100 or 200 years or so, and then you have Plotinus pops up in Egypt. I think he lived in Alexandria. And Plotinus was the revival of what they call Neoplatonism. So he went back to Plato. He had a more mystical approach to it all. It's kind of, they say that Neoplatonism is kind of like the secret Platonism, so sort of like the aspects of Plato and Socrates and Pythagoras that were secrets that they didn't teach you unless you were initiated. They say that the Neoplatonists basically were just taking that all public. So it's kind of the weirder side of Greek philosophy. It's very magical. So they have what's called theurgy, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, using outside forces for manifesting things in the real world.
Synthetic magic.
Yes.
And harmony and all these sort of things and magical rituals and contemplation and exercises like that to become like that super subject and sort of create a union with the one or the monad. So really, really interesting.
So this concept of, you said it was super
subjectivity.
I've never heard about that before. So you're supposed to dissolve into, like the alchemist, he dissolves into space and time or something like that, or what?
Yeah,
do they know what the goal of that was, to what you said, to become one with the monad, with the source?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, it is. But they think it's sort of how would you phrase it? Sort of like engulfing everything, or the term they would use if you're reading like Iamblichus or something would be comprehending everything. So sort of to come to a full understanding of the world as it is would be like this transcendent state, and that's you sort of overarching everything else. It's not you dissolving down into an object. Sort of like the body is just like an object, and I just myself becomes obliterated. It's more like I'm transcending up and overseeing everything else, as sort of a god or something, or becoming one with God.
The Grapha Dogmata is
the
what?
same thing in the end. It's more like a philosophy of how you're getting there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the Grapha Dogmata, which is Plato's unwritten doctrines, how you're saying that he said, maybe these guys were full of shit, but that it was so wild, so crazy, that he couldn't even write it down because it would just, you wouldn't even be able to handle it. That's how crazy and wild it is. And I don't know if you watched any of the A Voyage to Cartesius, to the World of Cartesius book that I covered, but something that's really been bugging me, that it relates to Jung, and I came across something today about it. But in that book, essentially, he's talking about Descartes' hidden, what I connected it to being his biggest scientific discovery after he had the series of those dreams. Descartes.
Yeah, the dreams are crazy.
The dreams that he interpreted. Like he wrote this whole thing on his dreams. Like, it was crazy. But after he had those dreams, the mainstream narrative is, he just, his meditations and that's fine. He
scientist.
Yeah, he just whatever. It was whatever. But then in this book, because I remember him saying, I have made the and I'm paraphrasing, the greatest discovery of all time. Something like that. Something along those lines. After he had come
they all
back.
say that.
Yeah.
Hey, I think it was Hegel said basically that history ends with him.
I haven't gotten into his stuff, but I'm a little familiar with it, but I haven't really gotten into it.
He had like the last man thing. And then Wittgenstein, he retired. So he wrote the Tractatus, and he said, yeah, this is it. Like, I answered all the questions. And he retired from philosophy for like 20 years. Anyways, you can go back to what you're saying. But they all think they got it solved. Yeah,
so he essentially, the discovery was the Cartesian coordinate system, right? That's what they say it was, but I think it's something much, much deeper than that. And essentially in this book, they talk about how Descartes figured a way to project his consciousness from his body into, and this is from mid 1600s. So this was the first time ever that outer space was used in the science fiction aspect of the word, like outer space, like science fiction, sci-fi. That's the first time it was ever used. And essentially they're able to project their subconscious, their consciousness to outer space, and they go to the moon, and they go to all these other worlds where they talk to Aristotle, they talk to all these the greatest philosophers, and they all have their own worlds in outer space. But the book goes on, and it's talking about all this crazy ass shit where they're talking about creating galaxies and doing all, and I know people, I can already hear in the comments, space is fake and gay, whatever, just forget about that part. But he goes on to say all this crazy stuff, and this Gabriel Daniel guy that we don't even really know anything about, he was a Rene Descartes esotericist, and we tried to do a decode on him, but we couldn't find anything on him. Gabriel Daniel, 2 first names. So he gets to the end after talking about how a homunculus takes over your body and all this crazy shit, bro. This crazy stuff. He goes, but I'm telling you all this right now, but there's one thing I can't reveal to you that's going to blow your mind. That's going to just obliterate and drive you insane. I can't reveal to you the secrets of magnetism. This is after a book that after the entire story where he's written about projecting your subconscious by sniffing this weird snuff from a box that Rene Descartes had, and he was actually killed because the doctors came through when he was in this other realm, and they just bled him while as he was in this other realm, so he was too weak to come back into his body, and all this craziness. He goes, but there's one thing I can't talk to you about. It's a magnetism. And in the book Aeon, Carl Jung talks about the hidden God that comes from the north that is activated through magnetism.
Wow.
And I came across yesterday another thing about magnetism where it's
insane. I mean, people like Walter Russell and Ken Wheeler, Tesla and all those guys, like you dig down those rabbit holes, it's mind-blowing.
So to Thomas Aquinas, magnetism is a end quote occult virtue which man is not capable of explaining. This was a profoundly anti-scientific viewpoint, and abomination not to probe hubristically into the working of the world. Isaac Newton could not have formulated his gravitational theory without a belief in the occult forces. And
Newton was way into occultism.
100%, bro. He was an alchemist and everything. So this idea, and I've been trying to really dig away at what they're trying to get at with this whole magnetism thing, and this hidden God that they talk about.
Well, so magnetism is interesting because in what you're talking about, like wave theory and magnetism, electricity and dielectricity and all those kinds of things. Highly recommend listening to Ken Wheeler, reading Walter Russell, and obviously Tesla and people like that. Those guys, I can't do any justice to what they have explained. But what's interesting, I can't really speak to magnetism per se because I'm no scientist in that way. But the philosophy behind it, like what you're saying about this God and all that, is really interesting because, again, the philosopher I mentioned earlier, Alfred North Whitehead, he believed that our current view of the world as made of matter in linear time could not explain things like magnetism, which you just said, like waves and things like that, because they're not made out of particles. Magnetism and waves are like forces, and they're not, you can't pin them down. There is no Cartesian plane for them. And that's a problem. And so that sort of is this other God-like force. And Alfred North Whitehead, basically, he's a sort of a Neoplatonist too. He's from the 1940s, but I would call him a Neoplatonist or something, because his philosophy is called process.
He was a mathematician, huh?
Yeah, mathematician, and then he became a philosopher afterwards. He has process philosophy. And his view of the world is really interesting. Basically, he thought that everything is constantly moving at any given point. Everything is constantly into a state of becoming. Every moment is sort of almost like a movie, is like a frame by frame of creating the next moment. That there is no sort of hard reality. Wow, that's really interesting.
So he's talking about Descartes here. So Process and Reality is a book.
I'm reading it right now. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, you're reading it?
It's so dense. I've read 50 pages, and I probably have 50 pages of notes that I've written on this. It's insane. Basically, the crux of it is he believes that the world is made of creativity. The world is not there are no things, there's only processes, basically. There's no static things in the world. There's no matter and atoms and boxes and chairs. There are, but they're processes. They're constantly sort of moving forward in time and changing. Nothing is staying still. And he had a Platonic view, so he thought that there's this realm of ideal forms, sort of eternal Platonic forms.
Abstractions is what he called it?
Yeah, that emanates from. And then he basically thought that there's this realm of eternal forms. There's some kind of creative mind, intellect process that turns the infinite possibility of forms. So like let's take a leaf, for example, or something. And there's an infinite possibility of forms that leaf could take, of tiny little differences in how the leaf looks. And something is mediating the process of those infinite possibilities and what actually occurs. So something is sort of choosing from the infinite possibilities and choosing what actually happens in the world. And he basically thinks that that's constantly going on. There's constantly this mind, this creative process going on. And then obviously it's creating novel things too, which is really interesting. So new things are happening all the time. It's a really wacky philosophy, but it's so good. I highly recommend looking into him.
Yeah, I'm reading a little bit of this. I'll probably download this book. He talks about how there is no mind-body dualism, and it goes.
Yeah, he's a monist. He thought that the world is made out of a process, not a substance.
Interesting. Yeah. And yeah, because Descartes, he talked about the Cartesian mechanistic universe theory, where it was how you're saying everything was pretty much there were three different levels of matter, and they're all in constant, they're rubbing up against each other in constant motion. Everything is moving around, and there are certain levels of matter that we can see and other certain ones that we can't. And anyways, it goes on and on. But don't you kind of sort of see, bro, where all these philosophers and all these minds, they kind of sort of have the same idea and concept, but they just switch it up just a little bit. And that's why I say I think that they have, I think that humanity as a whole has the big picture. There's a bigger picture. There's something bigger that we can't explain, except that the pieces to the puzzle are all fucked up. They're all shuffled around. We don't know how. We don't have the right order.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the Byzantine Empire, because I know I wanted to focus on the Plato, and then you kind of talk about Plotinus, and I
guess that kind of leads up into it. So you have Plotinus, who sort of reignites philosophy. He wrote the Enneads and some other. He actually has a book that's a response to Gnosticism. That's good. It's really short. You can read it. He basically shreds Gnosticism, like their philosophy. Really short. You might not agree with all of it, but it's his philosophy versus their philosophy, and he just roasts it. Really great. After him, one of his students was named Porphyry. He's been super influential. All the Neoplatonists are influential in occultism, for sure. All of them, especially in Renaissance occultism. They all basically were Neoplatonists. You get Porphyry. After Porphyry, you get Iamblichus, who's probably the most up your alley. He wrote the definitive biography of Pythagoras by Iamblichus, which is great. That's still in print if anyone wants to buy it or read it. And he was the trippiest out of the bunch, basically. So he's kind of him and Proclus, the two of them were sort of the end of the line for Neoplatonism, and they were the trippiest. So it kind of just kept getting weirder and weirder as it went on. And, that could just be secrets becoming more public or something. But Iamblichus and Proclus were all in on astrology, magic. Well, they called it theurgy. It's more or less magic. They were into all divination, you name it. They were into it. And they had huge influences on Sufism, on Islamic thought, on Christian mysticism, and on and on and on, all the way up until today. And sort of to lead into the Byzantine Empire, obviously those guys were Greco-Roman. Most of them, they were living in the Roman Empire, mostly in Egypt. But they were in like this Greek tradition of philosophy. So it's kind of feels weird calling them Roman because they're like they so identify with Plato and these people, but they're Greco-Roman. And of course, the one of the things that we wanted to talk about tonight is the Greco-Roman Empire. So one of the most overlooked aspects or parts of Western history is the Byzantine, what we call the Byzantine Empire. It's also referred to as the Eastern Roman Empire, or even just the Roman Empire, depending on what year you're looking at. And it's so interesting to look into it. I really highly recommend doing your own research, guys, on the Byzantines. It's inexhaustible and so fascinating and so overlooked. I mean, most of us, at least me in school, I heard mentions of Constantinople as being like a trade hub, and may have heard a few things about the Byzantine Empire, but nothing in depth. And that is 100% on purpose. I don't want to get too conspiracy-ish, but this really is not. Basically, the Roman Empire was massive. It encompassed, all of Southern Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Eastern Europe. Just humongous, which ended up being part of its downfall. So in the 300s, Emperor Constantine was like, all right, like Rome is a terrible strategic city. It's I believe it's landlocked. So it's not on like a major port. You can be surrounded on all sides. It's on like I forgot all the reasons, but it's like a flat plain or something. It's awful. And they kept just getting wrecked by these Vikings. They're like, all right, we need like to just find a perfect city that's on a perfect port. It has one way in, one way out sort of thing, easy to defend, and just set up shop there. And so Constantine, who by the way was the first Christian emperor, and that's another reason why he wanted to move the capital, because he kind of wanted to start a new thing and make it like super Christian.
One thing I heard was that he didn't convert until he died. Was that true, or was that his mom?
No, that is not true. He didn't get baptized till he died.
Okay, I got you.
That's actually a hilarious story, because he didn't want to be baptized until he was on his deathbed, because he didn't want to get baptized and then sin afterwards. You know what I mean? So he didn't want to be like, oh, I got baptized, but then I made all these mistakes, which kind of nullify it. He wanted to be like, no, I want to get baptized and just go right to heaven, which is a really funny way.
And we're not talking about any Joe Schmo. We're talking about Constantine, that quite literally, or we have the Council of Nicaea happening around this time. So it's not just, oh, there were just some people. No. These are at the core.
Yeah, these are the big ones, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Constantine, I mean, he's called Constantine the Great. He's one of the greatest Roman emperors. He did some horrible things too, but he moved the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome, which is unthinkable, from Rome itself to Constantinople, which is modern day Istanbul in Turkey. It was, they made it impenetrable. It's on a major port between two seas, perfect strategic location. And they basically set up shop there in 300 and were there with some ins and outs for about 1100 years. The Byzantine Empire was ruling in what is now modern day Turkey, and nobody talks about it, at least in the West, in America. Almost nobody talks about it. If you want to read books on the Roman Empire or whatever, the Mayans, there's tomes. But if you look up Byzantine this, Byzantine that, you have to find one academic book. And this is an empire that for over 1,000 years was the most powerful empire on planet Earth. So I know people want to talk like Tartaria and all that kind of stuff. If you want like a real conspiracy, look at the Byzantines, because they are shadow banned basically, and that's on purpose. It's on purpose, man, because in about the year like 1000-ish or like 1100, I don't have the dates on hand, you had what was called the Great Schism. So you had the Pope, who was still back in Rome, and if you go from 300 to about 1100, that's hundreds and hundreds of years of these people being all the way in Constantinople. It's a long way from Rome, and they started developing their own beliefs, which were not
1054.
Which were not in line with what the Pope liked and the Roman Catholics liked, and they call it modern day Greek Orthodox.
Bro, this is the schism where they were arguing about the bread. I've talked about this, where they were whether leavened or unleavened, is that how you say that? Leavened bread should be used in the Eucharist.
All the theological arguments are like hilarious and so hard to even understand. But there was a lot more going on politically between the two of them. And basically they had a split. So they're like, all right, like, you guys, you're now the Eastern Roman Empire. You're not part of the Roman Empire anymore. And, you can have your own religion. So they have their own patriarch, who's like their pope. And they were like, all right, we're on our own. Like, we'll do our own thing. They already were interesting. So the Byzantines spoke Greek. And when you think Roman Empire, you think Latin. But the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, was not speaking Latin. I'm sure most of them knew Latin, but they were speaking Greek. So they had a little bit more of a classical air to them. They were very Greek in culture. So like they all read the Odyssey, and they were all studying Greek classics. And they had Plato, who in Western Europe was not around. So Western Europe had Aristotle preserved. But Plato was not present in Western Europe during the Middle Ages. And a lot of people think that's why a lot of the vitality and mystery and interesting stuff was sucked out of Western Europe, was because they didn't have Plato. They didn't have these big hitters who were sort of being held in Constantinople. A lot of these cultural pillars. And it's so fascinating because, when you're studying history, you'll eventually run into the Middle Ages, medieval times, which is 1,000 years from about 500 to about 1,500, give or take, where nothing happened, more or less. Yeah, that's why they're called the Dark Ages. There were just knights riding around, and, you lived as a serf or a peasant. You just, like, hoed a field and ate.
Yeah, the Knights Templar, though, bro.
Yeah, there was some interesting stuff. Well, that's Byzantine history too, but we'll get to that.
Oh,
You're just eating like stale bread, and you had like the monk haircut or something. It was like just life was awful. And while during that exact same time, that exact 1,000 years, that is Byzantine history. It's going on at the same time. So in Western Europe, life is terrible. In Eastern Europe, in Constantinople, life is amazing. It's a flourishing empire. You know, you look at Byzantine art and churches and things, they're just massive, golden, high vitality, life force sort of culture. They're studying the classics. They've got all the stuff, super inventive. I think me and you have talked before, but they had automatons. So they had steam powered. This is totally legit. They had steam powered mechanical animals, birds and lions, and smoke machines and things like that. When you would walk into the emperor's court, they would have 2 lions next to his throne that would roar. They're mechanical, and they would have gold, and everything's made out of gold. Golden birds that would chirp and all these things. Just insane kind of stuff. This is going on at the same time as the Middle Ages, where nothing is happening. Like 90% of the population are like actual peasants that are illiterate and stuff. And Constantinople is just balling. And basically, what the reason I'm saying all that is the Catholic Church, because of that schism, the Catholic Church is super resentful towards Eastern Roman history and Constantinople, because that's a different sect of Christianity to them. And they don't want people saying, hey, wait, those Orthodox Christians got some really cool stuff. They're real, they have this amazing art, they have amazing philosophy, they have automatons, and their city hasn't been sacked in 1,000 years, and that, they're defeating all the greatest armies in the world, and they're continuing the lineage of the Roman Empire and all this stuff. And the Catholic Church is like, no, we're just gonna like erase that, and everything that was going on in Europe was just the Middle Ages. Nothing was going on, and so they try and really, I think, cover it up. It seems like it. I mean, I don't tend towards conspiracy theories, but how could you not end up there? I mean, for someone who's interested in it, there's a handful of good books on what's over 1,000 years of really interesting history. Byzantine history includes the Crusades, so the Knights Templar, of course. The Crusades were fought. I think we talked about this last time, but the Crusades were fought to protect Constantinople. Because, Jerusalem's one thing, right? Jerusalem was surrounded by Arabs and was held by Arabs, by Muslims. And Christendom in Europe, the sort of Christian Europe, was like, oh God, like they're coming, And Constantinople, in what would be modern day Turkey, is right next to the Middle East. So they're like, we're next. Like if they take Jerusalem, they're coming here and we're toast. And they basically convinced the Pope in Italy to call up the forces and be like, come on, like we gotta go and push them back on Jerusalem, because if they take that, like we're all, if they take Constantinople, they're coming into Europe and we're completely screwed. And so they sent all of these forces to Constantinople. So all the Crusaders, all the Knights Templar were going to the emperor of the Byzantine Empire and taking his directions. He was giving them passage across the Bosphorus into the Middle East and saying, and sometimes even giving them land and things in return. So that the Crusades and Templar history is Byzantine history. And that's something, again, that sort of gets overlooked. And then,
because they were also trying to alchemically transform the world with the cathedrals that they were able to erect during this time as well.
Yeah, the Hagia Sophia is Hagia Sophia You can look that up. I mean, it's one of the biggest churches in the world. It's still standing in Istanbul. It is, I will say, unfortunately, a mosque now. I don't mean that with disrespect to Islam. I just mean that it would be amazing to see it how it originally was, with the mosaics and things. So it's not that I care that it is a mosque. It's just that in the process of making a mosque, they did whitewash and tear down a lot of its original artwork and things like that. And it's, it's the number one tourist destination in Turkey. If you go today, that is insane. If you look up just Byzantine architecture in general, the churches that they were making were ridiculous. The mosaics and paintings, incredible. Their military power was insane. They held off Attila the Hun. They held off hordes of Arabs who conquered everyone else. Nobody could take Constantinople for 1,000 years. Wow, great pictures.
So fun question. Do you think that was because they were just that legit, or do you think that there was something else at the core?
I think really it was the strategic position of the city, to be honest. In like the movie 300. I
actually have 300 pulled up on one of the tabs.
All right, so in the movie 300 how they're facing the Persians, and they funnel them into like that between the two mountains. It's like a pathway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like they're totally outnumbered, like 10-1. But if they can funnel all these people in, they stand a chance. That's how Constantinople was. Basically, there's one way in, one way out. They're on a peninsula. So imagine it's like Florida or something. You only have to defend one thing right in front of you. And they just built up what are called the Theodosian walls, these massive walls. And then they had just a strategic position. And the wealth that existed in Constantinople was unimaginable. Unimaginable. I mean, I was reading a book called Byzantine Civilization by Stephen Runciman, and he actually says that the wealth present in the peak of the Byzantine Empire cannot even be comprehended in today's terms. The gold that they had, which is real wealth.
Some say that they were transmuting that gold, bro.
Probably. Yeah, and in magic, Greco-Egyptian magic was commonplace. Really interesting is that they had the Greek. So it's such interesting history because of where they are, basically. They're considered Romans, part of the Roman Empire. They speak Greek, so they have that Greek tradition. They're in more or less like the Middle East in Eastern Europe. So they're on the border of the Arabs. So they have that Arab influence, that Egyptian influence, Greek influence, Roman influence. And they even they're the center of trade. So they're getting, the Silk Road comes right into Constantinople. So they're dealing with the Chinese and the Indians. So it's a very sort of melting pot type of thing. And that I think is what makes their history so interesting, because they have a little bit of everything. They're sort of syncretists, and definitely your commoner, your everyday person in Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire was blending mystical traditions. So they were making magical talismans, but they were using Christian imagery. They'd have like a cross or something. They'd have like a picture of Mary, but above that they would have like an Eye of Horus above it. So it was like they didn't really have a fixed identity, and they had all these different backgrounds around them. So they were molding everything into one, which is very magical. And they were taking Egyptian influence, or taking Greek influence, Middle Eastern influence. They had Solomonic magic present in Byzantium. We know that for a fact. They had great alchemists and great magicians. Michael Sellis is really important. He wrote a book on like demonology. They had philosophers, of course, and yeah, just fascinating stuff. I like all the stuff where your everyday person was basically participating in like magical type of things all the time.
Have you read this book?
Yeah, I read that book.
Nice. I'm
I
gonna
have it.
download it.
I have it in my house. Let's see.
Yeah, so Byzantine Magick.
They even had Nordic and like Viking practices coming down, like magical practices, rune type stuff, because the Vikings and the Vikings a broad term, but Scandinavians and Germanic people were coming to Constantinople as soldiers. So they would serve in like what was the Varangian Guard, and they would pay these soldiers, foreign mercenaries, basically a lot of money, great money, because they had no allegiance. They didn't want to kill their general to become, eventually become emperor or something. They didn't want to plot and scheme. They're like, I just want to get paid. Like, I don't really care about Byzantine politics, like I'm from Denmark or something. So they did it on purpose. The sort of secret service of the emperor were all Vikings. They called them the Varangian Guard.
What? Really?
Yeah. Yes. And of course, they're great soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And they also employed eunuchs extensively. Eunuchs, like the whole court of the emperor would be eunuchs, because they didn't want to backstab the emperor. They had no kids to fight for, to set up for high positions. They didn't want to. They're not getting in those little games. They're just like, I don't have a lineage or a legacy, so I'm just gonna serve my emperor. And that's one way that they avoided the Middle Ages, because what led in one part to the Middle Ages, or what defined it, was feudalism, where these families would become lords and dukes of whatever, and they'd buy up all the land, and they'd have serfs and peasants work on land, and it would just be like one family rules over a whole area, and it's terrible because the family sucks. They're just like a bunch of rich douches, and then everyone else is illiterate, so nothing gets done. In the Eastern Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, that didn't happen in the same 1,000 years, primarily because high positions would be taken by eunuchs, given to eunuchs. So they avoided that familial, what do they call it when you like hire your son and stuff? Nepotism. They avoided that nepotistic tendency, in that the setting things up solely for your family and just screwing everyone else, backstabbing the emperor and that sort of thing with eunuchs. Pretty creepy, but still.
Yeah, but the eunuch in Game of Thrones was a scheming. He was a snake, bro.
Oh yeah, he was scheming. Yeah,
he was always scheming, bro.
The thing was, remember, he was always scheming for whoever was the king or queen. Whoever, like even when he's scheming for Daenerys, he thought she was the true queen. Yeah. You see, so he wasn't scheming for his family, for his kids, because that's when things get really messy. He was only scheming for whoever came into power. So that's sort of how they created it.
In Plato's Republic, did he call for the philosopher kings to be castrated? Do you know?
That I don't know, to be honest. Yeah, but Byzantine Magick and things, like the book you just pulled up, is fascinating. Basically, the book goes over a lot of the everyday things, like evil eyes and sort of paranoia, superstitions and things like that, and how common magical practices were: amulets, rings, talismans, altars, and a lot of times it's Christian magic. It's they're using amulets and talismans and altars but they're using Christian imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily what we think of as magic
Because
today.
it was natural magic. As long as you weren't using, back to theurgy, if you weren't using outside influences, then it was okay because you were using things that God put in nature already. Hence, this is why alchemy came forth, because they were like, we're just mixing stuff together. God can't get mad at us because we're just putting. Why would he put that tree there and this other thing if he, we're just. The physicians were the magicians, and the physician was exposing what already was in nature in order for the benefit of man. So they were only exposing what was already there, similar to how the Plato believed that we already know everything. We just have to remember it, right? You have to remember all the knowledge. You're already born knowing everything. But yeah, I downloaded it, so I'm gonna take a look at this.
I'll read a few notes I have. Well, one of the things I mentioned, Michael Psellos. He was actually like a skeptic. So he's a Byzantine scholar, and it's just kind of funny. He was skeptical and wanted to investigate all of these magical occult type things, and in doing so, he actually resurfaced them, which is kind of he totally did not accomplish what he wanted to do. So things like the Chaldean oracles, the Hermetic corpus.
Oh, this was a Greek monk back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he brought back the Chaldean oracles, the Hermetic corpus, and Neoplatonic literature, right? And they hadn't been forgotten, but they were not popular. And he was like, oh, let me go back and look at all these things and prove that they're, whatever, this and that they're silly or heretical. And in doing so, he brought them back to the mainstream. And so now all of a sudden, Neoplatonism, theurgy, Hermeticism, the Chaldean oracles were all popular again, which is kind of funny. And of course, that he actually became a big figure in like magical traditions because he inadvertently, like he wrote a book on demonology, but he's criticizing it, right? He's like skeptical of it. But
okay, King James.
Yeah, like King James, yeah, who's like writing against it, but then all the occultists want to read it, because it has all these interesting details. There's interesting stories like Zoe, the Empress Zoe, and that's another thing in Byzantine history. There were empresses, not just emperors. So it was sort of a progressive society in many ways. The Empress Zoe had a statue of Jesus made with incredible materials, so it's like gold and all that. It was so lifelike. This is from the book. So lifelike that it could respond to requests by changing its color.
What?
And it could also answer questions on the future by changing complexion. And she offered perfumes as sacrifices to God and had an entire alchemical laboratory for making perfumes. So it's like this like highly feminine, like magical Christian thing going on. They had so many wacky things. So I'm so interested by all of it.
Bro, what in the world? Really? That's like, that is the most heretical thing I've heard today. A statue of Jesus that they infused with some sort of talismanic magic to invoke an entity into it in order for it to divinate to them.
Uh-huh.
What in the world?
And then she was doing perfume alchemy, basically perfume magic. Anyways,
that's not suffumigation, is it? Yeah, kind of, sort of. The burning of substances to produce fumes is part of magical rituals. And yeah, because so one thing that because you keep mentioning talismans. One interesting thing about this time as well was because John Dee was part of this too during that time, right? Because you said it was that 15th century. When does the Byzantine
right?
1400s?
So this is what I'm going to get to.
Oh, 1450. Okay, so this is before.
So this is where it gets really interesting, Juan. You just touched on a good point. You can see on that timeline that the Byzantine Empire falls in 1453. The Arabs finally, and I can tell the story real fast, basically this guy had brought back gunpowder from China, or somehow figured out the secret of gunpowder. He's a Hungarian guy, and brought it to the emperor at the time. And I think his name was also Constantine. And there was a prophecy that the first and last emperor of the Byzantine Empire would be named Constantine. He was like Constantine the 11th. And there were a lot of prophecies that are really cool. And this guy came and he said, hey, like, I have this gunpowder stuff. Like, let's build a huge cannon, like 100-foot long cannon, and we can take on the Arabs. And the emperor was like, all right, man, like, I've got, like, the Arabs are on the doorstep. Like, get out of here. Like, I've got better stuff to do. And the Hungarian guy, you know, he's in it for the money. So he went to the Arabs and was like, I think they were the Turks at that point. And he was like, hey, I've got this gunpowder in the cannon. And they're like, all right, we're in. You know, we got to take down the walls of Constantinople. Like, no one's ever done it. They wheeled in. They created let me see how long this. Look up the cannon that took down the walls of Constantinople. It's like 150 feet long or something insane. Every time they'd shoot it, like half the crew would die. And dude, I'm not joking. The cannonball could go like 1 or 2 miles.
The Dardanelles gun, weighing 16.8 tons, measuring 27 feet in length.
Yeah.
It's capable of delivering a crippling damage at a range of 1.5.
1.5 miles.
What?
Yes. They wheeled this thing in, shot down the walls of Constantinople, and that was game over.
So he goes to Constantine, the last one.
Yeah.
He says, "Forget about it." So then he goes to the other guys, like, "Yo,
yes,
I got this stuff."
He wants to sell his idea. Basically, he's like, "I know how to do this. Like, just give me the dough." And they're like, "Sick, we're in." And they used it, and they took the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and that was game over. And never got taken back. And now it's Turkey and Istanbul, and it's been Muslim ever since. But what's interesting, this is where it gets really fascinating, and what they really don't tell you is that in 1453, when the Byzantine Empire fell, the Arabs they're actually not so bad, because they said to the citizens of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, they said, look, like, this is ours, like, you just have to leave. Basically, you have to become Muslim or leave. Like, they're not going to, like, slaughter all these people. And these citizens considered themselves Roman. Still, they called themselves Romans in 1453 still, which is just, you know, another thing. They don't tell you this. They tell you the Roman Empire ended in like 500. But in 1453, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines, called themselves Romans. And the emperor said, I'm the Roman emperor, you know? They don't tell you that, because they're
Of
not
the
Catholic.
Holy Roman Empire, right?
Well, that's another thing. That was created basically for the Pope to say, no, look, this is the real lineage of Roman Empire, not you guys, not the Greek Orthodox fakers in Constantinople. Actually, Charlemagne and the Catholic boys are, you know, the Franks and so on, are the real lineage. This is the Holy Roman Empire. And anyways, and that was totally in spite of the Byzantines. They did everything they can, like you just pointed out, to sort of smear and keep it down. And in 1453, when it fell, they said, all right, we're Romans. So where do we go when the city falls? We go back to Rome. And so all the Greek-speaking citizens of Constantinople and Byzantine Empire, they weren't going to become Muslims. They weren't going to stay in an Arab-occupied or Turk-occupied city. So they went back to Italy, to Rome. This is all legit history. And what happens after the Byzantine culture floods back into Italy? The Renaissance. The Renaissance is Byzantine culture coming back into Western Europe and revitalizing it out of the Dark Ages.
Whoa.
The Dark Ages ended when the Byzantines came back to Western Europe. They brought back with them Plato. They brought back the Hermetic corpus, which was in Greek. This is interesting. The Hermetic corpus was not translated into Latin until 1471. It was in Greek the whole time. So they had the Hermetic corpus in Constantinople. They didn't have it in Western Europe. They didn't have the trippy business, the alchemy, all stuff. I mean, it was going on. There's
since
magic.
the 3rd century, because I mean that's where in Egypt is where it originated, according to mainstream history.
Tradition went straight into the Byzantine Empire. It was present in the Byzantine Empire. That Greco-Egyptian magical tradition.
Yeah, the magical papyrus as well. You have that.
Yeah, that was all going on in Constantinople. And when the city fell and they went back to Rome, they brought with them Plato and all this trippy occult business, and revitalized. And they brought with them the classics, Greek sculpture, Greek painting, all of this stuff, which is the Renaissance. And all of a sudden, Western Europe is like, all right, we're back, out of nowhere. In the Catholic Church and in Western history, that's what they tell you. They're like, oh, the Renaissance just happened. Like, they say, oh, we had like mercantile capitalism and the merchants of Venice, and, people were a little better off. And so the feudal system ended, and that's it. That is not it. That is one factor. But in reality, it's the culture flooding in from the East, bringing back all these classical traditions back to Western Europe. And so that's the true history, which you never hear about. The Hermetic corpus, the Neoplatonism, Greco-Egyptian magic, all this stuff comes back in a big way in the Renaissance. And then, right after that, in like the 1500s, you start getting all the big hitters we know of. John Dee, and on and on and on, everyone we're familiar with. And you get Rudolph II in Prague, which is not that far from Constantinople. And he's trying to carry on like that sort of tradition and revitalizing Europe in, the occult ways and esoteric stuff. And it comes back. It was gone for 1,000 years, more or less. Could have been held in secret societies and stuff for sure in Western Europe, like the Templars and the Rosicrucians and what have you. But it was out in the open in Eastern Europe. And then in the Renaissance, it's back out in the open, more or less. It's an interesting, molding, basically, combination you don't really hear about.
Yeah, so it has this reemergence. It's this where how you're saying it was underground, and then it kind of popped its head back up, and then goes back underground around the 17th, 18th century, where it starts to die off, but not because of that, because of modern day. Well, I'm talking about alchemy, modern day chemistry. Everything else is more not, because again, this is also during the time where you had Descartes and all the greatest minds, like around this time, the 15, 16. And one thing I wanted to point out, because you were mentioning talismans and all these things, at the core of talismans is mathematics, which we know that John Dee and all these great minds were mathematicians, there were polymaths, there were these guys that knew everything. And the operation of creating a talisman involves astrology, the alignment of the planets, so astronomy, for those that believe in planets, and all these things. So it was mathematically encoded, pretty much is what a talisman is. Like they're using mathematics to imprint something on that piece of whatever it is in order to bring forth these properties that were otherwise supernatural, or who knows, but to charge it with a certain sort of energy. And Al-Kindi, I think, was 9th century, so this is before that, but either way, like the stellar rays and harnessing those rays from the celestial bodies to charge these items as well. There is I believe it was, I want to say 9th century Islamic talismanic magic, where they talked about using talismans to quite literally warp people's perceptions and put phantasms in their minds and make them see things that they wouldn't otherwise see in real time. They're talking about, that's talismanic magic. That's these people at that time.
So some other notes that I had was that, this is kind of interesting, was that in Byzantium, and actually let me clear up that term before I even continue. Byzantium and the Byzantine Empire is a term. This is totally legit, coined by Catholic and Protestant historians in like the 1700s, 1800s. It is a new term. The people of Constantinople called themselves Romans. They consider themselves the Eastern Roman Empire. The term Byzantine and Byzantium are basically derogatory terms. They're terms created by Christian historians who want to distance that empire from their version of Christianity. So they give them this name that makes it sound so foreign. You know, you hear Byzantine Empire, it sounds like some Arab, it sounds like something you have no idea what it even is. What is Byzantine? What does that even mean? Mm-hmm. And actually, the word is a legend. It basically means nothing. The legend is that the guy who founded the village where Constantinople ended up being, hundreds or thousands of years later, that his name is Byzant or something, and it's like totally just a story they make up to 1770. This is a recent term.
Wait, what? So what? They named it way after it was actually a thing?
It was never called that. No one in the Byzantine Empire has ever heard the word Byzantine or Byzantium in their life. This term was created to distance them and smear them and keep them from claiming Roman lineage. You see? So if we can label them something else, then they are something else, as sort of we talked earlier. Anyways, so that just seals the deal in terms of them being hidden, them being suppressed in history in the West.
They just completely changed the name of the podcast, because I was gonna name it something completely different, but I'm gonna dub this the Byzantium, or however you want to say it, conspiracy, bro.
Yeah, it is. But this is interesting. So with the Christian magic, in the sort of blending of Christian, Egyptian, Judaic, even Greek traditions, the Christians at the time in Constantinople actually wanted to align their version of Christianity with older traditions, like the Greek mystical traditions, like the Egyptian mystical traditions, because they actually, which is funny, because in religions you don't want to be a new religion. That's not a good thing. You want to be an old religion. It gives you like this credibility. So they actually wanted to align their Christianity with these ancient systems to give them more credibility. So they wanted to blend in Greek and Egyptian things and even Jewish things to sort of pump it up and be like, no, actually, like, we're just a continuation of this.
Legitimize them, yeah.
Because if it's like the year 300 and you're like, yeah, it's this guy from like 200 years ago, people are like, I don't know, like, so you wanted to sort of like hang on the coattails, and anyways.
That's funny, bro. That's pretty.
What
That's
else?
pretty
Oh,
hilarious.
they had something called Greek fire. I don't know if you've ever read about that.
No, dude, you're
It was
blowing
a
my mind
form
right
of
now.
napalm.
So, real quick, because we're talking about the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. There's people who believe to jump it into the whole Tartarian crowd because essentially, I mean, I know Tartaria, quote unquote, comes a little bit after this time, I guess. I don't even know when you would consider Tartaria a thing, like timeline wise. Maybe what, early 1900s and on, like anything, right? The Gilded Age, what, I don't know. So that's Tartaria, but that conspiracy also linked to that there was no Dark Ages.
Yeah.
That didn't even exist. That they just like blend everything together,
Right.
and just put it out. I know that the ADBC system that we know was Joseph Scaliger, a Jesuit. I believe he was a French Jesuit that came up with the time chronology. I mean, as we know it today. And I believe Fomenko talked about this as well. And then you have the J and the year of our Lord and all these different things. What are your thoughts on that? That this time that you've been talking about quite literally didn't even exist, and that it's just a fabrication, and that it was much shorter than what they claimed it to be. Because we're talking about an empire, how you're saying, was one of the longest ruling empires of all time.
Definitely in Western history, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like brushed over.
Constantinople was the center of the world. No exaggeration. Like any history book will tell you that. Constantinople was the trading center between Asia and Europe, between the Middle East and Europe, between all of these things. It's smack in the middle. They had control of the Mediterranean, control of the Black Sea, Red Sea, Black Sea, whatever the sea is that they're on. I think it's Black Sea. All of these things. They had naval control. They had control over North Africa. They were by far the center of culture for sure, and wealth for about 1,000 years. And we gloss over them like it's no big deal. It's really amazing. That's what made me want to look into it. I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Like, what? I don't know about like time folding and time jumps and all of that. I can't really speak to it, but it's certainly interesting that in Europe you have 1,000 years of nothing at the exact parallel with 1,000 years of Byzantine history.
Damn, bro.
And that we focus more on the nothing than we do on the Byzantine history. Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
It's pretty wild. It's going on at the exact same time.
Yeah, because how you're saying this, when the split happened, I'm not even thinking about the split. I'm thinking that it's all one thing all together, and it just kind of rolls over. But no, there was, how you're saying, that split.
Yeah. Yeah, Eastern and Western Europe were completely split. Western Europe did nothing. Eastern Europe was balling out. Just like gold, like gold buildings, just like robots and, all that. Like they had all this crazy stuff. They had Greek fire, which I just touched on. Greek fire was a secret. Actually, it's in Game of Thrones. Like that green liquid stuff that they like. I forgot what they call it, but they pour it on like the water and
they blow it. They blow the queen up at the end of it with the whole thing underneath the.
Yes, that's Greek fire. So in the Byzantine Empire, which is a fake term, but in the Byzantine Empire, they had Greek fire. It was a secret. No one knew what it was made out of except the people who made it, and it was like a guild. Like you couldn't tell the secret. And it helped them defeat everyone. They were literally just like flame. They had cannons that would just shoot out fire, like flamethrowers. And if they were surrounded on the sea, they would just set the sea on fire. I mean, it was like unbelievable. And it's what else?
So they didn't know what it was made out of, and only the people who made it knew about what it was made out of?
Yeah. Like anyone outside of the people making it hadn't.
Guarded state secret. Wow. However, these mixtures use formulas different from the. Oh, so the Arabs, the Chinese, and the Mongols, they had their own, but these mixtures use formulas different from the Byzantine Greek fire, which was closely guarded state secret. They had flamethrowers, bro.
Yeah, they had flamethrowers, they had automatons, like totally balling out on all fronts. And our history books just gloss over, like, oh, yeah, Constantinople, was like the new Roman Empire, Great Schism. You might hear some of that. They don't tell you all this crazy history. They don't tell you about Emperor Julian. Look him up, dude. Emperor Julian he was emperor for like 2 years. He was a full-on, and the empire was Christian. He was not a Christian. He was a Neoplatonic, like Greek mystical emperor. He was initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. He was all in on Neoplatonism.
Do I got the right guy here? This guy?
Yes.
361 to 363?
Yeah, Neoplatonic.
Oh, 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was like a badass general, winning a bunch of battles. He died in battle, actually. But he was like huge in revitalizing like paganism and Greek paganism and Neoplatonism and all this stuff. He was initiated into the mysteries. This is going on in the 300s. They don't tell you that, that Roman emperors in the 300s are still being initiated into Greek mysteries. I mean, you know what I mean?
He allowed Jews to rebuild the Jewish temple. Okay.
Yeah, there's another funny thing to show you how Western Europe is so down in the ditches. Was that there's a funny story of Emperor Basil II. His niece got married to an Italian, like prince or whatever. And there was not a lot of crossover between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Like, they were not on friendly terms, but this was sort of a political thing. And at the wedding feast of his daughter, they saw her using a golden fork. It's a fork made out of like solid gold. And the Italians were horrified. They'd never seen a fork before. And they were horrified. They were like, these are forks that God gave you. Like, this is blasphemy. Like, you're not using God's forks, your hands, And you could look up, there's like paintings of her, of this moment in history where like the fork is basically invented in Western Europe. Like, they were like barbarians, Meanwhile, in the Byzantine Empire, they're like fully civilized, like all this stuff. I don't know. I have so much fun just juxtaposing the two.
It's something I've definitely have not looked into because we're so focused on I'm focused on like the woo stuff, and obviously not saying that this didn't happen, because there is obviously fuckery afoot with mainstream history, which we have to be careful for. So of course they're gonna omit certain details and change things up in order to benefit their cause, whatever that may be. If you believe in that as well, like if there is this cabal of people that are at the center of it all, orchestrating these things and pulling the strings, if you want to believe that, because some people don't believe in that either. But yeah, this is really fascinating, man, as far as everything that we've covered. And I never knew it was that interesting, but because I've read about the Templars, I've read about what happens after this era, I've read about Plato, I've read about Pythagoras, all these guys that kind of were at the forefront of
There's so many books on all of those things.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, like everything you just mentioned is surrounding this part of history.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing on that part of history. You're like, wait, I know everything about the Renaissance. I know everything about Greek and Roman history. I know Caesar and all, but in between all that, it's just, they used whiteout, and they're like, wait, no. Those people
write the book, bro.
Yeah.
You write it.
I probably will at some point. There's a few good books, but they're not they're not amazing. There's not enough scholarship for sure.
So I say for the next one, we talk about Rudolph. We were supposed to talk about Rudolph on this one, but we didn't. But we'll talk about Rudolph on the next one. And then we can segue it, with John Dee, Edward Kelly, all those. I've been looking into some stuff as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'll have to do more research. I know my stuff on Rudolph, but John Dee and Edward Kelly I need to do.
And Paracelsus, we could talk Paracelsus too, bro.
Yeah.
Like, that dude was on some shit for real, like, during this time.
Yeah, and Rudolph had Kepler there too.
Kepler and Tycho. He had Tycho.
He had a bunch of guys.
Bro, he had the crew.
He had 200 alchemists working under him.
Bro, Tycho Brahe was another guy that he had the fake nose. He had the fake nose on there, and he had a reindeer or something that's a best friend. Did you ever hear that story?
Edward Kelly had no ears, right?
Edward Kelly allegedly had no ears. He was a cropped-eared wizard. Yeah.
Nice.
So, dude, we'll get into that on the next one, and I'll invite my friend who's obsessed with Rudolph as well, and we can chop it up with him.
What are you reading lately?
Right now, what I'm reading is I'm in the middle of a couple things actually. So the reason I asked you about that artist at the beginning was I'm reading The Laurel Turns Green by my friend Alexander Rivera. He was co-author with Tracy Twyman on the Baphomet book, and I'm reading his book. He's going to be on the show. We're going to talk about it.
Nice.
And what else have I been reading? I've just been reading miscellaneous things as far as that goes. I told you I'm skimming again through The Devil's Doctor by Philip Ball because it's a really good read. I love history that's entertaining as to read, while you're reading. It's telling you real things historically, but he's also very poetic in the way he says things. So, and the reason I'm rereading that book is because I want to do an episode on Paracelsus, because I believe that Paracelsus is an episode on its entire, just one episode on his own. But there's so many things about him that are around that is just like, where do you pinpoint? And I want to focus more on like the non-mainstream stuff, right, with them, like the esoteric, occulted stuff. Not like he was born here and he did this. Like, no, I want to talk about like some other crazy shit that he was into. Like, he believed in giants and dwarves and fairies and all these crazy, like the cool parts of the character. So I just been reading a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff, research papers, and as far as books, I just finished. What did I just finish? Peter Levenda's The Stairway to Heaven, I think it's called. I finished that recently. Peter Levenda, Stairway to Heaven. Look it up, bro. Chinese alchemist, Jewish Kabbalist, and something or other. I finished that recently. I read my friend. Yeah,
it's a good book you might like.
Which one?
Called The Last Kings of Shanghai. It's about Jews in China. It's crazy. And basically, I think it was, Shanghai was like had a huge Jewish population. Yeah,
interesting.
It's crazy. And they were huge, powerful families in China. They're white, like European Jews, living in China in exile mostly.
That's not a conspiracy at all, huh?
No, it's not. It was weird. It was like a loophole of sorts where like the only two countries I think that were still allowing Jews in with like I don't remember the details, but without like some kind of visa or something were Germany and China. And obviously we know what happened to the ones that went to Germany. No bueno. But
yeah, the
ones that went to China ended up being like extremely successful financially, and actually they became like billionaire families in China.
Whoa.
And people, again, no one ever talks about like there were like European Jews in China.
Mm-hmm.
They were like a big part of the country. Big populations, thousands.
I'll check that out. Do you have anything else on there?
No, just that book. But basically, this is where it gets weird. Is because when World War II ends and they create Israel, a lot of the Jews who ended up populating Israel were the ones from China. So, yeah, they're not Chinese. Like, they're European, you know. But they were like, oh, like, the Holy Land's back. Like, we have a place for us, you know. Like, I don't want to be in China. So they all left and went to Israel. Swear to God, dude. You can read the book. It's like, it's true.
Wow. Okay, that sounds really interesting too. So
Well, the ones in Europe were like killed, or they went to America or like South America or, you know, other parts of Europe. They were like, oh, Israel? I don't know. Like, but the ones who were in China were like, I got to get out of China. Like, this is, you know. Anyways,
interesting. I'll check it out. And then, how many books do you read at a time, bro?
right now I'm reading 3. I for a long time my rule was to read 1 at a time, but I've recently broken that because I'm so busy, which is kind of funny. I'm really busy and I end up reading like more widely because I don't want to read like one book really slowly. I'd rather read like 3 books really slowly.
Yeah,
you know?
me too.
I feel like I'm getting at least a little bit of, you know. And
Yeah.
I luckily I read a lot as a younger person, even in the last few years before I opened the bookstore. So I kind of got a lot of the classics out of the way and stuff. So now I can focus on like things I'm really interested in. Right now I'm reading Process and Reality by Alfred North Whitehead, that we talked about earlier. I'm reading On the Mysteries by Iamblichus, a Neoplatonist, translated by Thomas Taylor. Who's the
I have
best
that one. I bought
Yeah.
it from your store.
And yeah, amazing book. And I'm reading Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce as well. So there's 3 pretty tough ones, but I'm getting through them. And I'm enjoying all of them. I take notes religiously. So any thought that pops into my head, or even if I'm reading some other source and it's analyzing the book, or I think of something, I write down almost everything.
Yeah, I think it's time I start writing my book, bro.
Yeah.
I did the cover a long time ago, so it's time I start
Really?
compiling. Yeah, it's right here. That's the cover to my book.
Oh, that's cool.
So I put it there so I can manifest it, and I think it's time to actually. What do they say? Don't get so busy reading other books that you forget to write your own. So I think it's time.
I did the same thing with the cover for Monad, the first book that we're going to publish. Those are all translated by Thomas Taylor at the collection, by the way, because he's the best translator of ancient Greek. He had a huge impact on occultism, actually. In the 1700s, he translated all these things out of ancient Greek, Neoplatonic writings, and Plato himself into modern English in the 1700s, and people just went wild. They're like, oh my God, you know. On the Mysteries is one of the big ones, because they're like, wait, like, things were a lot wackier than maybe we thought, and sort of connected the English with that old Greek tradition and those philosophies. And so anyways, we actually did what you did. We made the cover first before we're going to put the book together as like a sort of way of visualizing it, manifesting it. We had like an amateur, I had the vision for the cover in my head, and then I had like an amateur artist to do it, like a cheap one, just have him get it out. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just so it's there for us to like inspire us, basically. And then I'm giving that to like a really legit artist to turn into something special. So it's gonna be really fun. It'll be cool. And then we're gonna go from there. We're doing a lot of stuff that's in the public domain first, for obvious reasons. You know, copyright stuff. It's cheap, so it'll be fun. But we've got a list of really interesting things that we're gonna be publishing, bringing back.
Awesome, dude. I'm looking forward to that. You want to plug anything before we get out of here for the people to check you out, or?
No, in true Longo tradition, I don't have anything to. I know my older brother kind of turns it down too, but I'm the same way. Nothing to plug.
Nice.
I got the bookstore, but it speaks for itself. So nothing here.
If you know, you know, and if you don't, then find out.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the next one, bro. We'll set it up maybe sometime next month. And
yeah, I'm ready whenever you are.
This was great, bro. You did awesome. This was really thought-provoking, very interesting, and as always, everybody, see you on the other side.
Man, he came up in church learning Jesus, but the questions that he had, they gave no reasons. Just told him to have faith or he's a heathen, but he just fell to pieces. Now he out of school, he on his own, away from everybody, with across a corresponding road. Professors at his college give him answers to the thoughts he couldn't get when he was growing up. All these religions and he's told they come from some earth, and now he feels confused, he don't know what to do. And now he's looking for an outlet for his battery, for his soul, but the ghost still waiting for him, of Crowley and LaFay. Finally power on the way, yeah, he loves the wave, but he don't know the trade. Dollars stacking like the flames, getting hotter in the other place. When the lights go off and we're left with everything we've done, was our treasure lost? I just hope we're closer to the one. When the lights go off and we're left with everything we've done, was our treasure lost? I just hope we're closer to the one. They cut the lights off, they wanna reset. Nobody give us respect. Got an army full of rejects, about to burn this place down. They cut the lights off, they wanna reset. Nobody give us respect. Got an army full of rejects, about to burn this place down. They cut the another lights midnight off. Shift, stocking shelves at Kroger. Lights up a marble red fresh cup of Folgers. The weight of the world on his shoulders, surrounded by woke vultures, pushing pronouns and cancel culture. Anonymous chat boards got him feeling bolder. John Doe and List becoming a digital soldier. Cognitive infiltration, false idol enclosure. Algorithm warfare, fabricated disclosure. Conquer and divide turns families into foe, placing politicians on an elitist plateau. Instead of finding solutions, he just sitting at home, bucket of popcorn, claiming he watching the show. They cut the lights off, they wanna reset. Nobody give us respect. Got an army full of rejects, about to burn this place down. They cut the lights off, they wanna reset. Nobody give us respect. Got an army full of rejects, about to burn this place down. They cut the lights off. Destroy all nuclear units, mother milk the system first. Why need daddy in a home if a check come up on the first? What if daddy was addicted and put the mommy through hurt? Did he come back from the war, but his mentor ran through the dirt? Did the example at home push a generational curse? Mommy Andy on her own, she don't need a man with birth. She feel prideful yet despiteful, cause the family is reversed. She had a kid again, made more money for survival. Men at work is competition, it pleasing to domicile. Dad can't operate the home, cause mommy think he a rival. He said trust me, let me lead, but the system is her idol. A woman's power is a myth, they convince you that it wasn't. It's not less than to be home, growing life inside of your stomach. And our power is a myth, once we harness up the scales, so we provision for the family. That's how I value. They cut the lights